Yo, man, y'all see it? Y'all see it? We back with another Trap Lil Ross documentary, man. This one is the murder capital gang war in America's deadliest city, man. Shout out to Trap Lil Ross. If y'all don't want to watch my reaction to this, you guys can watch it. I'll leave the original link down below in the description down below, man. But yeah, let's go ahead and get to it.
Drops on Spotify, so go search me there. Here's the video. While the antics of Sexy Red let the world know that St. Louis was home to serious national street gangs like the Bloods, the streets of St. Louis have really been deadly for decades. The city had claimed the crown of America's murder capital all the way back in the 1980s, but particularly since about 2010, St. Louis has consistently ranked amongst the most dangerous cities in America when looking at the per capita violent crime rates, particularly homicides. And during the late 2010s, St. Louis would go on a streak, having the highest per capita homicide rate every single year, culminating in 2020 when the city's homicide rate was an insane 88.1 per 100,000 people.
Like I said, man, if y'all want to watch my reaction, I'll leave the original link down below. If you guys want to go watch the full stuff right here to Trap Lil Ross.
Basically doubling the murder rate of Memphis, which is also known as one of the most dangerous cities in America too. And St. Louis would continue topping the leaderboards of the nation's most dangerous.
Dang, St. Louis, Missouri. 15 most dangerous cities: St. Louis, Missouri, Jackson, Mississippi, Detroit, New Orleans, Baltimore, Memphis, Cleveland. Wait, Cleveland gets down like that? Baton Rouge, Kansas City. What the fuck? Kansas City? Wow. Richmond? Bro, what the fuck? Richmond? Oakland makes sense. Little Rock, Arkansas, Milwaukee. Damn, Philly.
Cities. The homicide rate even ranking St. Louis as the deadliest city in the world outside of Latin America. The record-breaking killing had continued all the way to last year, 2024, when St. Louis would once again have the highest per capita homicide rate, over double that of Chicago, which had the most total homicides. But to truly understand how St. Louis became one of the most dangerous places in America, overrun by gangs and violence, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, because at one point in history, St. Louis was considered one of the greatest cities in the country, known in the 19th century as the Gateway to the West, where numerous explorers and pioneers since Lewis and Clark would begin their journey to settle the American West. This history of St. Louis is still commemorated with the city's most famous landmark, the Gateway Arch that dominates its skyline. Being the gateway, together with the city's strategic position at the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers, made St. Louis a key hub for trade, transport, and migration, which brought both the people and the money to the city. This ended up making St. Louis the fourth largest city in the country by the year 1900. However, the significant population boom also brought some questionable characters to the city, which planted the scenes for the organized crime takeover during the 1920s, when Prohibition-era gangsters took over the illegal booze business and brought about one of the city's first ever gang wars. These would include Italian gangs who were predecessors to the St. Louis Mafia, such as the Green Ones and the Russo Gang, led by a notorious gangster called Willie Russo, as well as some interestingly named Irish or mixed gangs like the Cuckoo Gang, Egan Rats, named after their leader Thomas Egan, and their main ops, the Hogan Gang or Hogan's Jelly Rolls.
Thomas Egan? Don't tell me Power took that from this. Thomas Egan, they put Tommy Egan. Don't tell me Power took it from this right here. That's crazy.
Named after their boss Edward Jelly Roll Hogan. Both Egan and Hogan being not just gangsters but also politicians, which says a lot about how things worked in the Prohibition era in St. Louis. One of the most known shooters of this era was the Green One's enforcer, Alphonse Palazzolo, whose boss was Vito Gianola, the city's most powerful mobster. In the late 1920s, tensions in St. Louis's underworld boiled over, igniting a brutal wave of violence as the Green Ones clashed with the Cuckoo Gang, a bloody feud that raged until a truce was reached in late 1926. But the peace was short-lived, and by August 1927, two prominent Italian mobsters, Tony Russo and Vincent Spicuzza, were gunned down in Chicago, the police suspecting that the killings may well have been the work of the Cuckoo Gang, reigniting fears of renewed conflict. But in reality, the two had been double-crossed by Palazzolo, who himself would be assassinated by four shooters already in the following month. But this get-back wasn't enough, and in December the ops would spin back again, catching Palazzolo's boss, Vito Gianola, lacking at the house of a possible love interest, with the local newspapers creating full-page breakdowns of the slaying, where the assailants had broken into the woman's house and sprayed almost 100 bullets with a submachine gun, hitting Gianola 37 times. As the
Damn! 100 bullets hitting this nigga 37 times? Damn, bro, when when somebody does that 30 some times or like 60 times shooting somebody, that means they really wanted that person gone. Like they really want up. Like they really wanted that person up out of there. Like they really wanted. Damn. Wow, that's insane.
Prohibition era came to an end in the 1930s. These gangs moved to other hustles like illegal gambling, union racketeering, and pushing drugs like heroin. And the various Italian gang factions eventually came together to form the St. Louis Mafia, which acted as the biggest criminal organization in the city until the 1980s, when a violent internal conflict within the mob, triggered by power struggles, shifting alliances, and the federal government's growing pressure on traditional organized crime, ended their reign.
Giordano's death in 1980 marked the end of an era in St. Louis's underworld history.
August 29, 1980, St. Louis mob boss Anthony Giordano dies of cancer. He had long held the rival Leisure and Michael's crime families together, but that was all about to change.
I saw the car blow up and the hood flew open and just pieces and body went flying everywhere.
19 days after Giordano's death, gang warfare erupts on I-55 when his ally, James Michaels, is killed in a car bombing while behind the wheel.
The information we've been able to determine at this time is that Mr. Michaels was removed from the quote organization.
Law enforcement makes repeated pleas for peace.
Bro, a car bombing is insane. St. Louis was getting down like that? Car bombing, bro, like, nah, that's a sad way to go out. That really is a sad way to go out from a car bombing. That's sad, bro. I'm not gonna lie. That shit's sad, yo. From a car bombing, that right there is sad. I'm not gonna lie. That's sad,
it's a misnomer to say they're fighting amongst themselves. When they're killing each other on the streets of your community, that not only reflects on them, it reflects on the whole community.
But as one faction disappeared, many smaller ones would appear, and the crack era brought an explosion of African-American street gangs who took over the St. Louis underworld. But of course, the formation of these African-American gangs in St. Louis began way before that. In the past, St. Louis was known as the most southern city in the north, which was actually a reference to the city's exceptionally racist laws and culture, despite its placement in a relatively progressive northern part of the United States. This was experienced by the city's early black residents firsthand during the infamous 1917 race riots caused by the combination of existing racial tensions and competition over labor in an industrialized urban center. During these riots, white mobs would kill and injure dozens of black people, while their neighborhoods were burned to the ground, causing damages that would be in the millions of dollars in today's currency. But there was perhaps even longer-lasting acts done by lawmakers at the time, such as...
Of course, that's what they do. In order for them to feel good about themselves because they were rejected by Europe, they got kicked out of Europe. In order for them to feel about each other, is they have to like put themselves on a pedestal, and they don't want no other minority, no black human, no black, brown, Asian people to be above them. And remember, black people, we did build our own towns and all that. Y'all know about Tulsa, Oklahoma. Y'all know about that. They seen that we were doing good without them, and we were surpassing them. So what they have to do? Go burn it, flood it. That's why when y'all see all these lakes, from Lake Lanier and all these lakes, all this was just flooded black towns, underwater black towns, shit like that. But they won't tell us this in the school books. They won't tell you this. It's because what they have to do is they have to make everybody believe that they're not the bad guy. They have to make everybody believe that they're not the bad guy. It's the same shit how the devil try to make the whole world believe that he's not real. It's the same shit. If y'all put two and two together, it's the same thing.
The city's 1916 residential segregation ordinance, which stated that once a neighborhood had reached a 75% racial majority, it could effectively block members of other races from relocating there. The results of this segregation are still visible in St. Louis today, with it being one of the most segregated cities in the country, with the white population predominantly living in the southern parts of St. Louis, while black residents settle down in the northern neighborhoods. And the clear line between these two communities is the Del Mar Boulevard. But unfortunately for St. Louis's black population, simply segregating them into their their own communities wasn't enough, and next, during the 1950s, the city would come after their existing neighborhoods, forcing about 20,000 black residents and 800 businesses of a neighborhood known as Mill Creek Valley to relocate in the name of urban renewal, as the entire neighborhood was demolished to make way for infrastructure like Interstate 64 and the expansion of St. Louis University. But of course, the city had a plan for the displaced black working class residents, as they had just built a new, enormous, state-of-the-art public housing project in North St. Louis, known as the Wendell O. Pruitt Homes and William Igoe Apartments, or together simply as Pruitt-Igoe. Designed by architect Minoru Yamasaki, these projects consisted of 33 11-story buildings which were hailed for replacing the so-called slums on the north side and bringing bright new additions to the city's skyline. But just like everywhere else in America, this colossal experimental project would quickly turn sour, as the buildings were since the beginning stripped of funding and maintenance, while the poor North St. Louis residents became even more isolated from the rest of society as they had been before. And in just a few decades, Pruitt-Igoe would descend into complete chaos, as the crumbling projects were taken over by gangs, crime, and decay in record speed. These projects became perhaps the biggest blunder in the history of public housing in America, as several YouTube channels have actually covered this development in depth.
Unfortunately, a lack of funding from investors where the city forced Yamasaki to revise the design for cost cutting. Basically, he was forced to double the density of the buildings and canceled plans for playgrounds, parks, laundromats, grocers, and even public toilets.
The first warning sign was financial. The maintenance of Pruitt-Igoe was supposed to be funded by the tenants' rent, but many of the residents were low income, and when vacancy rates began to rise, there wasn't enough money to keep up with repairs. The skip-stop elevators, designed to reduce congestion, instead became crime hotspots. Stairwells were often dark and isolated, making them dangerous for residents. The communal galleries, intended as social spaces, were soon taken over by gangs, and vandalism became rampant.
See what I mean? This is what they do. They push everybody out to one thing and put these in the projects. That's what we're gonna call the projects. And then when they done, once they done, they do the same thing. They tear down apartments, go build some new ones, boom, raise the price. It's the same shit, bro. They don't want nobody else to do better. They're only mad because they rejects from Europe. They got kicked out of Europe. So they have to make themselves feel better. That's why I said, bro, if any other like race, black, Mexican, Asian, if they had their own communities, own neighborhoods, own schools, hospitals, stores, stuff like that, they'll be the main ones to go try to burn it down, flood it up, because they don't want any other race to surpass them and do better than them. Remember, black people as a whole in America are the most hated, not only America, but the world. But I promise you right now, if black people were here no more, remember, they love the black culture, but they don't like us. Shit makes no fucking sense. Let's say if we weren't here no more, bro, the world will not survive. America needs us. As mouth they won't say it, the mouth they hate us and they talk shit about us, they need us. They need us. Let's just say we start fucking, let's go build our own continent, state, or whatever this countries. Let's all go to Europe and build our own shit. Bring everybody from the artists, players. Let's go, boom. Promise right now, America will fall. America needs black people. We keep America running. Whether you like it or not, I'm speaking facts. We keep America how it is. We keep it going, even though they fucking hate us and shit, man.
Rampant as the buildings started to feel more like traps than homes. Some of the buildings were so poorly maintained that in the winter of 1970, a burst sewer pipe flooded the hallways with raw sewage, which froze to people's beds and clothes, slowly thawing out and leaving their belongings destroyed. Teenagers formed gangs for protection, and violence became a way of life. For many residents, walking into their apartment felt like running a gauntlet of danger. The utopian dream that was Pruitt-Igoe had turned into a nightmare of crumbling infrastructure, rampant crime, and hopelessness.
The Pruitt-Igoe experiment would come to an end during the 1970s when these projects were finally closed and demolished, but for street gangs of St. Louis, this was just the beginning.
In 1972, demolition began on the 33-building Pruitt-Igoe housing project, built in the 1950s as the vision of the future of urban America. It turned out to be a symbol of all that had gone wrong with America's older cities, and this image would be played over and over again on national television and cited by the commentators and academics.
The 60s and particularly the 70s were some of the most violent times in St. Louis, but the streets were mostly controlled by the mafia and some smaller scale dope pushers such as the infamous drug kingpin Terry Joe Cooley, who would eventually meet his end in 1970 after he was killed in his home in a brutal quadruple murder that would also claim the lives of his associate, his girlfriend, and her 10-year-old son, with the newspapers at the time questioning if he had been killed due to his growing ambitions to take over the city's drug game. Also during this period, St. Louis would also begin to experience significant economic decline, combined with white flight as the largely white middle class moved to the suburbs, leaving the predominantly black working classes with crumbling infrastructure and underfunded schools. These issues would hit East St. Louis on the Illinois side of the border first.
East St. Louis was experiencing in 1970 the kind of pain that a lot of other places were experiencing in the 1930s during the Great Depression. There were tremendous amounts of job loss in East St. Louis. It was an old smokestack, heavily industrial city. And as those technology and ways of doing business changed, businesses were pulling out of East St. Louis, businesses that had been there for 100 years or more.
Then, in the mid-1980s, local newspapers would begin reporting about a rising youth gang problem in East St. Louis. Some of these gangs, unsurprisingly, being Chicago-originated gangs like the Gangster Disciples, Black Disciples, and Vice Lords, although there would apparently also be some locally originated sets like the 38 Specials, the Scorpions, and the Rat Patrol. The news would also mention how the Disciples worked differently from other gangs, as they had had more structure and leaders coming all the way from Chicago to administer discipline and train the local members. But in 1988, things would begin to escalate.
That's when the Crips and Blood. See, the thing is, back then, yes, black people and Mexicans, brown and black community, they did create gangs to protect themselves in their neighborhood. And there was structure. It was structure. But then when them people went to jail, the newer generation, there's no structure. There's no lead, not like leader, but there's no like guidance. There's no structure. That's why nowadays it just motherfuckers killing each other because there's no OG. There's no structure. All the OGs are in prison for life. That's what they wanted. Take the OGs because when people growing up, there's no structure. Boom. It's the same shit. If the military had no structure, that's what it is. It's like if the military had no rankings, is what I mean. Like, it'll be everywhere. Like, but if we're being serious, the biggest gang in America is police. It's the cops. Let's be honest now. The biggest gang in America is police. It's the cops. Let's be honest now. They the biggest gang. Cops can do what the fuck they want. They can abuse their power. They can set you up. Some bullshit.
Quickly, as a little-known movie called Colors would hit movie theaters all over America, showing the life of LA gang members and bringing with it the vivid imagery, style, and mythology of the Bloods and Crips gangs, which would soon take roots in cities far beyond California. At the beginning of the 90s, St. Louis newspapers would begin reporting how so-called wannabe gangbangers emulating the Los Angeles gangs had begun harassing students in some schools for wearing certain colors. But the police would downplay the growing gang problem in the community. Perhaps this was simply not to spread panic, but the reality of the streets couldn't be downplayed. One particularly deadly rivalry would be between two North St. Louis gangs known as the Boys of Destruction, or BOD, and their rivals being known as the Horseshoe Posse. This rivalry would much later in 2009 be covered in the 4th season of the popular TV series Gangland in an episode titled Boys of Destruction. The BOD gang was allegedly founded by a member named Dorsey Brandon, and the members of the gang identified as Crips, their turf being on the south side of the
Always, if y'all ever see Martin Luther King Street or something like that, just know it gets active and it's dangerous. I promise you right now. If you ever see Martin Luther King Street, anything like that, just know it gets busy and it's active. So you better watch out if you see that.
Luther King Drive, while the Horseshoe Posse, led by a young man named Hitman T, identified as Bloods and stayed on the north side of King Drive. This rivalry would escalate in 1991 when, first in March, Hitman T, real name Tyrone McClinton, was shot to death in front of a gas station when he was only 17 years old. This was decades before gang members had Instagram Live to broadcast their disses and tell the city that they were smoking the latest dead op. But the streets never change, and gang members in early St. Louis would find analog methods to diss their murdered rivals. Following Hitman's death, BOD BOD would allegedly taunt the Horseshoe Posse by spraying Dead Man tea into a wall near the scene of the incident. During Hitman's funeral a week later, BOD members would allegedly shout insults to the members of the Horseshoe Posse, almost starting a mass brawl that was barely stopped by the police on the scene. But then, some months later in October, the BOD leader, Dorsey, would be shot and killed during a violent night when 4 people were killed in less than 24 hours, marking just how deadly these gangs had become. The following year, in 1992, the news would report how the gang problem had gotten out of control. Now the police were also seemingly coming clean and admitting that many of the gang members that they were arresting had in fact real connections to the Blood and Crip gangs in Los Angeles, and that their infiltration to St. Louis had started already in the late 80s, incentivized by higher profits from interstate drug sales. The police would also reveal that the gang culture went far beyond the black community. There were also gangs with white members and even some fully white gangs, like one known by the menacing name Hitman Posse. The article would also highlight how violent the gangs had become, which was...
You see? The motherfuckers is vultures. They hate us, but the level we're doing. They niggas is vultures. Niggas is vultures. Remember, like I said, black people are the most hated in America. They hate us so much, but they love our culture. They'll take something from our culture, they'll try to, and then they try to act like it's theirs. You know what I'm talking about? Especially on TikTok. It'd be a black creator doing a dance, then you got one of these white motherfuckers going in, and then it gets viral, and they're talking about it's their dance. It's not your fucking dance. That's why I can't say one. How the fuck do you hate a race so bad, but you love their culture so much? That shit makes no sense. And I'm not even talking about America. I'm talking about the whole world. Look at K-pop. That shit is just R&B music. That's all it is. R&B music from Temptations, Destiny's Child, New Edition, Boyz II Men, all that shit, TLC, all that K-pop shit, all that shit is just their version of black. They'll literally take. I'm trying to tell you, bro. I'm really trying to tell you, bro.
It was reflected in the number of homicides that would peak in the following year, 1993, with the article highlighting one gang rivalry that had led to 8 youths' deaths in less than a year. This rivalry reportedly being between the 6 Deuce East Coast Crips and the 44 Blue Bud Crips from North St. Louis near Fairground Park. By 1996, the St. Louis gang problem had spread outwards from the inner city to the suburbs in the county, with the news mentioning that the Rollin 60s Crips had become one of the most dominant factions both in the city and in the county. Ultimately, emerging from the Rollin 60 Crips was St. Louis's most popular rapper, Nelly, who while didn't rep his gang in his songs, would make coded references to his gang's colors and be spotted wearing all blue on regular occasions. By the 2000s, various Chicago and LA originating gangs had become a normalized part of daily life in the streets of St. Louis. A new generation had now taken the reins, while some from the older generation were trying to right their wrongs, mentoring younger members and helping them escape the cycle of violence. But this normalization came at a cost. Unlike in the 1990s, when media attention was intense, the issue began to fade from public focus, as coverage was mainly reduced to surface-level reports about scattered anti-gang initiatives, while the city would build a new state-of-the-art facility to hold the growing number of inmates known as the St. Louis City Justice Center, or simply Justo. But the spread of gangs continued across the city, unfolding largely in the shadows, until of course the city's homicide rates began to get completely out of control, forcing reporters to look for reasons. While the officials would seemingly settle for half-baked solutions, or some pointing fingers at each other, with certain people claiming that judges were actually at fault for proving who did a homicide too high in St. Louis. But as the homicide rate kept rising to its highest levels, the rules of the game would completely change, with the rise of drill music from Chicago, gangs from Los Angeles, and social media apps from Silicon Valley. Gang members began to use music and Instagram accounts to broadcast their illegal street activities. And on social media, St. Louis ultimately became one of the most feared destinations. Nowadays, countless hood vlogs are up on YouTube, with vloggers risking their lives to go and visit the most dangerous city in modern America, racking up millions of views in the process.
Nearly every year for over a decade, St. Louis, Missouri has had the highest murder rate out of all major cities in the entire US, leading to its reputation as the murder capital of America. In 2021 alone, it nearly tripled Chicago's murder rate, with over 87 murders per 100,000 people. With such a menacing reputation and little coverage of the hoods there past dark, I wanted to experience this city for myself. So in today's video, I travel out to the trenches of St. Louis, visit a rapper who just beat a murder charge, narrowly dodge the police, and spend a night in the murder capital of America.
What had once been a hidden criminal underworld had now become a social media reality.
Bro, if the government, whatever, if they really want to stop their violence, they could, but will they? No, because it comes with money. If y'all really realize, bro, we actually working for free, bro, because you can't keep your money. Got paid bills, all these bills. Never mind.
TV show with gang warfare all out in the open. So to better understand the gang landscape in St. Louis today, let's take a closer look at the modern generation of gangs and rappers in the drill music era who are broadcasting their gang wars for the whole world to hear. St. Louis locals usually split the city into several sections, with two of the main sections being North St. Louis and South St. Louis, also known as North City and South City. As already mentioned, St. Louis is one of the most segregated cities in America, and the great majority of people in North St. Louis are black and working class, whereas the South is predominantly white and middle class. Although there are also numerous black and mixed neighborhoods in the South, while the invisible line between these two communities is generally considered to be the Del Mar Boulevard. The city's racial population overall is interestingly an almost even split 50-50 between black and white, with there being very few other races like Asians and Latinos in the area. Because of the socio-economic differences between the North and the South, it's no surprise then that the great majority of gangs in St. Louis are located in the North. But due to the mixed neighborhoods both racially and economically, particularly in South St. Louis, this community has several sets that have both black and white members, which of course brings up the topic of the most famous white drill rapper coming out of St. Louis, CTS Lil Wick, whose set 70 CTS is located all the way at the bottom of the South Side. Lil Wick would actually end up getting major headlines after catching a murder charge in 2022 and beating it, but more about that later. Due to the far greater gang activity in the North, the great majority of homicides actually
They have white members and black gangs. Hey man, you know the same stuff, man. You know, saying it's different nowadays, man. You feel me? You ever see black people, black members in Latino gangs? Saying sometimes, it's rarely, but sometimes.
Do take place there, which is exemplified by the fact that the main street cutting through the North, Natural Bridge Avenue, was named as the most violent street in America in 2015, and the area around it continues to be a hotbed for shootings and homicides.
New tonight, 10 days into the new year, and city homicide detectives now have 7 cases. The latest occurred late this afternoon at Goodfellow and Natural Bridge. We're told the victim was shot in the head.
I've never in my life heard anything like, that's what it sounded like. You know, it's like continuous for like maybe 30 seconds.
Police say they responded to a shooting in the 6,000 block of Natural Bridge. Officers initially went there and saw bullet holes in the two-of-a-kind bar and grill, a building next door, and a vehicle. Shell casings could also be seen in the street. Police later arrived at a hospital and learned a 29-year-old man, a 36-year-old man, and a 32-year-old woman had been shot.
The street even had a gas station that had so many shootings that it ended up getting the nickname Murder Mobile. Natural Bridge acts as a border for numerous gang-affiliated hoods, many of whom are at war with each other in the area, with one of these hoods being 45 Retta, a blood-affiliated hood which just so happens to be where the rapper Sexy Red hails from. The name 45 Retta goes all the way back to at least the early 2010s, while the affiliation with the Bloods likely goes back way before that to the late 80s and early 90s. As the name 45 Retta demonstrates, most of the hoods in the city rep a certain block, in this case the 4500 block of Margaretta Avenue. Sometimes two of these hoods come together to create an alliance, which is often repped by combining the two first numbers of the block. For example, there's a hood in North St. Louis known as 48 Shreve, who are in an alliance called 1448, with another hood all the way down in South St. Louis near downtown called 14 Peabody, or simply the Jects. The latter name coming from the fact that this area has been home to several large public housing projects, in this case particularly the Clinton Peabody Projects, which is the oldest public housing development in the city and about to go through a complete redevelopment. Moreover, while members from almost every hood rep an affiliation with traditional gangs like Crips and Bloods, it's also common for hoods in St. Louis to have some members who rep different gangs, and unlike Los Angeles, it's not uncommon to have both Bloods and Crips within the same hood, although in this case, the hood might rock another color entirely.
But that is true, bro. It's kind of crazy how Bloods and Crips are like they share like the same neighborhood. You know how saying that is? Bloods and Crips, and they share the same neighborhood, and sometimes they be at it. They're the same neighborhood, and they be close to each other.
Like the hood known as 51 Scan, or simply Scan, on the west side of St. Louis, who have members from both Bloods and Crips, but rock the colors green and black, which to them represent money and murder. In an interview with Say Cheese, the rapper LA4SS from Scran would explain the difference between the Bloods and Crips of St. Louis compared to Los Angeles.
Okay, and the west side is Crips?
Bloods and Crips. And,
so they're mixed in one neighborhood.
Kitchen Crips, 6 Deuce Crips, 8 Trey Crips. It's 9 Trey Bloods, 9 Deuce Bloods. You know
And all these are mixed in one neighborhood?
Yeah, all these is everywhere. Like, ain't no, like this ain't gang with this ain't organized gang. This ain't organized crime. This ain't nobody, ain't no OG, ain't no big bro, ain't no, like it's a Crip, Blood, GD from the east side, and a Vice Lord all in one car right now. It ain't nothing about no color over here.
Okay.
It's about what you standing on, your hood.
So I'm guessing it ain't about the color. So I'm guessing it's probably about what neighborhood you're from, what street you're from. It's probably that. I know it's essentially in Detroit. It's not about the color. It's about what street, what neighborhood you from, or street, some shit like that.
Hood, for real.
Yeah, see what hood you from.
So
yeah,
that's what makes it different from California. It's not segregated. It's not blood neighborhoods and Crips neighborhoods.
Yeah,
it's really
like with
cliques.
all due respect and humbly say, like, we ain't no Cali Bloods or no Cali Crips.
To make things even more confusing, particularly the newer generations within these block-based hoods often create cliques with completely new names. For example, 30 Deep Grimy grew up on 2 blocks on the north side, one known as 442 Ville, or simply the Ville, and the other as 45 Ferris. Both blocks have historical ties to the 6 Deuce East Coast neighborhood Crips, which is what Grimy also reps, but as he got older, he would also become part of a clique known as 30 Deep. And lastly, due to the history of how the Chicago gangs like the GDs or Vice Lords first arrived in St. Louis, these affiliations remain the strongest within the Illinois side of East St. Louis, while St. Louis the city is overwhelmingly Bloods and Crips. In fact, despite East St. Louis being just across the river, due to it residing in a completely different state, Illinois, many in St. Louis do not even consider East St. Louis to be part of the city in any way, as voiced by 30 Deep Grimy on social media.
Say it like this, all you East Side Shine Cotton comments and shit, bro. It's one, I ain't even say one, it's a couple of you East Side steady cap. I ain't never heard no from y'all talking about, oh, we don't know him. Cause y'all's from Illinois, not St. Louis, Missouri. Stop saying the east side of St. Louis.
So now that we know a little bit more about the current gangs of St. Louis, let's
East
take a closer look at
Louis is in Illinois? What? Wait, that's really in Illinois? What the fuck? Oh, it's across the river.
city's overall drill music scene, which has made some of the most feared gangsters from these hoods into national celebrities. St. Louis for long has been a city with deep history in music, playing a key role in the early development of blues and jazz, and its thriving music scene has been home to world-renowned artists like Miles Davis, Chuck Berry, and Tina Turner. But today, we're more interested in the music giving a voice to the gangsters waging war for survival and hustling to get by in the streets. St. Louis has a thriving drill music scene that began to develop soon after the original Chicago drill scene went global in the early 2010s, but it wasn't until the late 2010s that St. Louis drill truly found its own voice and came into its own, getting the local name high-speed music due to sometimes having fast beats and flows, but also because the lyrics often mirrored the city's street culture, where members of local gangs had no fear of getting into frequent high-speed chases with police.
In St. Louis, y'all don't call it drill music, y'all call it high-speed music?
Drill music, high-speed, yeah, it's more of a high-speed music, for real. More of a high-speed, fast tempo, yeah.
Okay, and that's what you felt like you started?
Yeah, I started high speed, man. I was the first person talking about a high speed in the St. Louis, period.
Yeah, because high speeds are real big in St. Louis.
Yeah, you know, it's crazy. It don't matter who, if you're the first one to do it. It's matter who goes viral with it. Don't matter if you're the first one to do it. You can be the first one to dance. Don't matter. It's the first person. Whoever goes viral with it, that's their shit. Don't matter if you're the first one to do it. It matters if you go viral with it.
You get high speeds every day. Like, it ain't nothing normal. It's normal here.
And of course, given the city's reputation as the country's murder capital, it's no surprise then that the music coming out of St. Louis is incredibly violent and disrespectful. Within a few years after the original Chicago drill became popular, several rappers from St. Louis began taking influence from the genre, such as a rap group known as 3 Problems, made up of 3 members known as Lil Tay, Swag Huncho, and Relly Rel, together with other rappers like LA Fours, just to name a few. The history of the St. Louis scene also can't be discussed without mentioning the AMR, or Ammunition Money Respect Clique, who were some of the earliest pioneers this and included rappers like AMR Freak and AMR D Huncho, with Freak even shooting music videos as early as 2015 with the Chicago cameraman Aze Production, and getting features from the biggest Chicago rappers like Lil Durk. AMR D Huncho's most popular song, Snapped, from 2021 has almost 2 million views on YouTube, but that same year, he would be shot an insane 16 times, fortunately surviving the attempt on his life due to the bullets hitting him mostly in his arms and legs. Then you've got Jizzle Bucks, formerly known as Jizzle Bands, is another early pioneer of the St. Louis drill scene. He would later drop a popular remix to King Von's Crazy Story in 2019, and would even end up getting a feature from King Von the very same year. Later rappers like 2 Bucks, also known as Big Bucks Von, would help to pioneer high-speed music, even dropping a popular song titled The High Speed Anthem in 2018. While there were also numerous other artists who have been dropping music since the late 2010s and are still doing significant numbers, such as the Monster Gang clique with guys like Monster Gang Jose and Rayster, and of course there's also 30 Deep Grimy, who would gain the most national attention in the scene during the late 2010s, becoming known not just for his raps, but also his wild gold grill grin, which made him resemble a villain like Jared Leto's Joker from the Suicide Squad movie. But like other cities with respectable drill scenes, there's a whole subreddit all about it called r/St. Louis Drill, which is dedicated to covering the city's intertwined music and gang culture today in 2025, having
and to
over
think about it, the St. Louis Cardinals play. Ooh, the St. Louis Cardinals, the baseball team, they play in St. Louis, and the Rams used to play in St. Louis as well, right? Until they moved back to LA.
17,000 members, with members of the sub regularly posting about the latest murders, arrests, diss songs, and making lists of the most buzzing artists to emerge from the drill scene. According to the subreddit, the currently top-ranked STL drill rapper is Mo P, who reps 1448. Still a very young and up-and-comer, he's been getting a lot of attention in the scene, even getting shout-outs from the city's biggest rapper in recent years, Sexy Red, who would be seen on her social media listening to his music. Arguably the other biggest name buzzing in the streets of the new generation of STL drill rappers is C4 Murder from Murderside, whose biggest music video for the song Some Light has over 1 million views. Over the course of this video, we're going to go from hood to hood, block to block, breaking down the most important drill rappers and feuds from each neighborhood. And the best place to start is the one who stands above the rest, 30 Deep Grimy, arguably the most influential artist to ever come out of the St. Louis drill scene. A heavy crown that unfortunately came with a lot of unwanted extra attention from law enforcement and his neighbors. 30 Deep Grimy was born Arthur Presley Jr. on August the 21st, 1997 in St. Louis. He was raised in a tough environment where gang affiliation wasn't so much a choice, it was a way of life passed down through generations, family ties, and the deep history of the sets in his neighborhood. Grimy's family had gang ties that stretched back generations long before Grimy was even born, something that he would break down to Vlad TV.
So, at what point did you start really getting mixed up in the streets?
I feel like birth. I don't remember my age. I had to be a kid. Like, it was all around me. It was in my household. It was everywhere.
His mum, dad, grandma, and grandfather were all allegedly members of the Six Deuce Crips, with his grandparents.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, but if your whole family in the streets, Crips, Bloods, you most likely might gotta be in the streets. So, or unless they wanted you to be better than them, then they'll probably push you away from that. But if you growing up in that and you're seeing it every day, you're most likely gonna be in the streets because that's what you see every day.
Actually helping to establish the gang in St. Louis. But unlike their Los Angeles counterparts who wore traditional blue, the Six Deuces in STL have carved out their own identity by rocking blue and orange. While Grimy's parents would eventually leave the gang life behind, the streets had already claimed the next generation, and through his family connections, Grimy would become affiliated with 2 Six Deuce hoods, both located in the north side of the city, including the 442 Ville, aka the Ville, who claim an area in the historical black neighborhood of North St. Louis known by the same name, as well as a hood known as 45 Ferris, located in the northwest on the border of St. Louis County. Growing up in these hoods, it didn't take long for the violent side of that lifestyle to find him. Grimy would witness his first murder at just 7 years old. As he would later explain to Vlad, this moment flipped a switch that would never turn off.
Do you remember how old you were when something violent happened in your vicinity?
Maybe about 7, 8, 9. It was a bad thing, like the baddest thing. Like I witnessed a bad thing. I don't really want to say, but you know what I'm getting.
It was also around this time that he became.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, bro. If you, the one thing, bro, if you in the streets and you see that, either one is gonna flip a switch to where you gotta protect yourself, or it's gonna flip another switch to where I don't want to be in the streets. I don't want to do this. I want to try something. You know what I'm saying?
became part of a clique known as 30 Deep, made up of his friends from several hoods, but particularly 45 Ferris. The name of the clique, according to Grimy, comes from the crew's habit of rolling around in large numbers wherever they went.
The 30 Deep name came from you just roll around 30 deep?
Yeah, going to the skating ring when we was kids, we used to go to the skating ring about 30, 40, 50 deep.
30 Deep also included Grimy's friend NWMC Murder, NWM standing for N-words with money or N-words with murders, depending on who's asking. The two would later become inseparable, collaborating on music and appearing in interviews together as they both built their careers in music.
I'm in here with 30 Deep Grimy and NWMC Murder.
Yeah.
You guys are both examples of how rap names are getting kind of complicated these days.
In a city where every block seems to be beefing with each other, 30 Deep would end up having more than their fair share.
Bro, like, look how many gangs, like, look at this shit, bro. God damn, like, look at this shit. And some of them, bro, look, Washington University in St. Louis. There's a zoo, St. Louis Zoo. Like, gang, bro, like, this shit is crazy. You got Missouri, and then across the state lines, it's more gangs. Even though it's in Illinois, it's still St. Louis. It's crazy.
Of ops, as they eventually became embroiled in numerous ongoing conflicts with other hoods and cliques across the city, such as 57 Floy, aka Floy Mob, and the 6000 LAC side, aka the Lucille Ave Crips, who were both part of a larger alliance in St. Louis's 6th Police District, also known as the Six. 62 Stillwell is another set located just across the street from 45 Ferris on the other side of Natural Bridge Avenue. They're also beefing with the 8, aka the Cochran Mob, named after the 8th Street and the former Cochran Gardens projects that were located near downtown. And they've also got beef with 14 Peabody, aka 14 Jects, also known as Brick City, located in the Clinton Peabody projects on the south side near downtown St. Louis. They've got issues with the O, aka the Ops, located on the north side of downtown, who got their name from the former O Fallen Place apartments that have now been replaced with new buildings, as well as several other hoods, as well as 5053, aka G Street, located in the Mark Twain neighborhood in North St. Louis, and 39 Strip, aka the Strip, on the south side. Now, as you'll learn in this story, the conflicts in St. Louis are incredibly complicated, with fractured hoods and many small gangs all at war with each other with overlapping alliances. As one Redditor would point out, despite their relatively small size, the Six Deuce Crips had become one of the most hated gangs in St. Louis at this point, even getting the nickname the Dookies as a reference to the number 2. Grimy would become a recognizable sight in the streets of St. Louis from early on, as he would begin to rock gold grills on his teeth at a very young age. But unfortunately, another thing that he would become familiar with since a young age was death. For example, as he would later rap on the song Emotions, in 2013 when he was just 16, his friend JD was killed while walking to school, while the following year brought more devastating news when his homeboy Keon, who had motivated Grimy to start rapping as a kid, was also murdered. And unlike many of the kids around him, Keon wasn't even really involved in the gang life, according to a Genius interview.
My homeboy Keon, he got killed. He wasn't really in the gangs or none of this. He motivated to keep rapping, like start rapping when I was first rapping. I used to freestyle shit as a kid, and Ning was a big influence on Murder, so that's like, we do it for them.
These losses would undoubtedly...
I think that is true. Some people don't really be in the street. That's because, you know what I'm saying, they see you with them. If you know some of that being in the street, that means you're affiliated with them. You know what I'm saying? That's just sad that innocent people, you know what I'm saying, be out here getting knocked off, bro. It's crazy.
Undoubtedly push Grimy and his 30 Deep friends deeper into the streets, but there would also be another event that would send the entire city into chaos. In August 2014, an 18-year-old named Michael Brown from the nearby city of Ferguson was gunned down by a police officer, Darren Wilson, under suspicious circumstances. This would trigger massive protests in the city of Ferguson and beyond, transforming the movement that had begun during the previous years after the 2012 killing of Trayvon Martin and 2013 acquittal of George Zimmerman, sparking the global Black Lives Matter movement. But over in nearby St. Louis, the Ferguson protests drew so many local officers away to assist that it left the city's own streets virtually lawless, turning them into a Wild West where anything could happen, creating the perfect circumstances to target your ops and get away with murder, as Grimy would later explain to Say Cheese.
Police cars, you can do anything in the city because everybody was in Ferguson County at the time, fucking it up. So you can go downtown and kill your enemy, go kill your enemy on the west side. Police ain't coming because all the police is in Ferguson. You can straight rob everything in the city right now or kill anybody you want to kill because Everybody was in Ferguson at the time.
Growing up in the streets, getting locked up would also be a regular occurrence, as Grimy would end up spending some time in St. Louis's former medium security institution, aka the Workhouse, when he was just 17. However, there were also more positive developments in his life, as Grimy and his friends would begin to take music more seriously, beginning to release songs and music videos under the 30 Deep moniker, with Grimy, who was known on his block as Little Arthur or LA, would begin dropping music under the name Grimy Deuce around the mid-2010s. But unfortunately, he would keep getting in trouble with the law around this time, next getting a UUW, or unlawful use of a weapon, charge for allegedly shooting out of a vehicle. But while Grimy would go back to prison, his friends would keep the crew's name alive in music. One of these friends being a 30 Deep member called Streets, who was actually Grimy's stepbrother. But unlike Grimy, who was a Crip, Streets was actually a 9.
I know he's been rapping since 2016. Damn.
Loose blood, once again showing that traditional gang alliances meant very little in St. Louis. But then, in August 2016, when Grimy was still locked up, he would experience yet another major tragic loss, as Streets was gunned down at the very gas station on Natural Bridge Avenue that had become known as Murder Mobile, killed by a man named O'Shar Lapsley. Grimy would rap about losing Streets on his song Emotions, saying he found out when he was inside and vowing to slide for Streets, who he said was a killer just like him. Losing his stepbrother affected Grimy deeply, and he would later get a huge Long Live Streets tattoo on his neck, while also making it a yearly habit of paying tribute to Streets by dressing in red with other 30 Deep members, and later explaining during his No Jumper interview how losing Streets made him calculate his every move going forward.
I don't know, but I lost a lot and I learned a lot. I lost my blood brother on my neck. Actually, for real, he my stepbrother, but I say he my blood brother because yeah.
When did that happen?
2016.
Okay, and so that was like
August.
That was.
I got a month after, and I was in there 9-10 months before he died, and it kind of fucked it up. But I learned. He died while I was in there. I learned from it. It up. I just calculated my every move from then.
Right. Damn. Yeah, that must have been rough losing him. What? You didn't get to go to the funeral and like that.
No, I was a danger to society or something.
Over the years, Grimy's losses would only keep piling up.
That's sad, bro. They tell you that you can't even go to your own brother's funeral, but that's some bullshit.
In 2018, another close friend of his, Tay-Tay, would also fall victim to gun violence, with Grimy later revealing in his song Emotions that Tay-Tay's murder hurt him deeply because they weren't on good terms when it happened. But while being in the middle of an ongoing gang war, in between spells behind bars, Grimy would keep releasing music, often with his friend C Murder, and coming into 2019, that music would begin to make waves in the underground, with the song No Cap first piquing the public's interest. This was a track that saw Grimy and C Murder proudly repping the Six Deuce Crips by rocking blue and orange clothing, while bringing the St. Louis drill scene to national attention by rapping in detail about the local gang politics. Grimy would keep applying pressure and releasing numerous music videos with visuals and lyrics that summed up the dangerous, gun-clutching life of a St. Louis Crip. And he would continue developing his versatility as an artist. His song Rockstar, which came with a music video, opens with a haunting display of obituaries for the many friends he lost to the streets. Grimy, rapping about the street life with a more melancholic and melodic tone, was showing the world that he was a three-dimensional artist with emotional depth. But don't get it twisted, just because he had a thoughtful and emotional side, he would still be getting very aggressive and disrespectful. Grimy's rise in 2019 would culminate in the release of the song Dead Goofies, a brutal diss track where he fired back at his ops, many of whom had started throwing subliminal shots at him and 30 Deep following his early success. The song provided a masterclass in viral marketing, starting from the thumbnail of the music video, which simply showed a menacing close-up of Grimy pulling off his best evil grin while rocking the iconic gold grills and clutching a rifle, looking like a straight-up Marvel supervillain. While the lyrics of the song were full of local lingo and references, including disses towards numerous rival factions and their dead and alive members. Some of the references would point to events from years ago, like Grimy telling his friends to roll up that Noah and telling how Lil Tyrell should be freed so that he can throw him a homecoming party filled with demons and shells of ammunition. These lyrics actually point to a famous case all the way from 2013 when a 16-year-old named Tyrell Davidson would end up killing another 16-year-old named Chauncey Brown. Brown was also known in the streets as Bossman, and he was a loved member of the 30 Deep clique. Tyrell would eventually be charged for the murder of Bossman, but in an effort to get him free, his mother would somehow get her hands on the witness list of the case, which would include other youths from both sides of the rivalry, including James Moore.
Do you get the witness list? What the fuck?
aka James Deuce, who was a friend of Bossman and a 30 Deep affiliate who had allegedly been with Bossman the night Tyrell had killed him. There was also Noah Barnes, who was a friend of Tyrell and had allegedly been with him the night of the murder. In order to get rid of both of these key witnesses, the mother would allegedly get the help of her brother, nephew, and a third man who would end up hunting down and killing both James and Noah in brutal execution-style slayings, both killings taking place within 7 months of the murder of Chauncey. In 2015, it would seem that the mother's evil plan had actually worked, and Tyrell's charges were dropped. But already the following year, everything would...
What the... Bro, how did she get... How do you get the wit... Bro, it's...
for a moment come crashing down, as both Tyrell and his mother were charged with multiple murders, and the case would become nationally known outside of St. Louis as the Murder Mom case. But the twists and turns weren't over, and in 2018, these murder charges against the mother were this time dismissed after a detective who was the state's key witness received a brain cancer diagnosis, and the judge refused to delay the trial. Crazy. However, Tyrell would eventually enter a guilty plea and receive a 12-year sentence in the end for the murder of Chauncey, aka Bossman, in 2020. Of course, to anyone outside of the St. Louis gang culture, lyrics like these likely made very little sense. But if you knew, you knew. And for the insiders, 30 Deep Grimy was dissing the whole city and praising the most twisted killers from his hood. The song portrayed Grimy as a certified...
Alright, man. That is it for part 1. Hope you guys enjoyed. Be back for part 2 tomorrow. Yes, sir.